If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up? I'll go first. I live in Warsaw, Poland now, but I always stay in touch with what's happening in the US, and I happened to hear about that Las Vegas shooting when someone opened fire on a bunch of concert goers. And it was very tragic news. But that day, I also went to the movies, so I was already in a kind of weird mental state. And when I left the movies, I got on the tram again in Warsaw, and I saw this guy kind of being sketchy and acting weird in the last seat. I kept eyeing him the whole time, and he had his jacket open and he was holding something inside. He was hiding it. And I thought, my first American thought was it's a gun or a knife or some kind of weapon and I need to move away as soon as possible. So I kept looking at him the whole ride, and then he takes it out and it was a beer can. He was sipping it and hiding it during the tram ride. That's what happens in Poland, not guns, not knives. And I started crying and laughing at the same time because that's when I realized, wow, that's messed up.
So I've been living in Spain for the last 2 years, and a little over a year ago, I was uninsured. I didn't have health insurance for about 2 months, and unbeknownst to me, in that short period of time, I got sick enough to where I needed to go to urgent care. And when I arrived, I explained to the women at the front desk that I didn't have insurance and that I would be paying for everything out of pocket, and they were aghast. They were just like, oh my God, it's going to be so expensive. You shouldn't have to pay all that amount. And I was like, look, I don't have insurance and my face is the size of a football and I can hardly open my mouth. I clearly need to see a doctor. And the total for my urgent care visit, along with 8 weeks of antibiotics, was €100. And that was expensive to them. And I was, in my brain, prepared to spend 6, 7 times that amount for that one visit and for that one round of medicine.
When I was in high school, I was a lifeguard, and during my lifeguard training, they taught us that before we even administer first aid or CPR, we had to ask for consent to avoid being sued. Now, fast forward a couple of years, and I'm in London as a waitress, and my company sends me to go do CPR training. And while I'm there, they go over the same stuff that I learned in the States, but I notice that they're completely glossing over this one particular area. So I raise my hand and I ask, what are the laws here? Like, how do you avoid being sued if something goes wrong? To which every single person in the room starts laughing at me and says, oh, you're American, right? Yeah, no one here is going to sue you for trying to save their life.
So I started my new job in the Netherlands. This was 3 years ago, and I was going through the company policy the first week. And I got to the section about leave, and they have a holiday leave, like PTO, and then they had sick leave in two different areas. And I was reading about sick leave, and I turned to my coworker, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, it talks about like the requirements for sick leave and like doctor notes like after 3 days, but how many sick days do we get a year? And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, how many are they? It doesn't say. She's like, it's just if you're sick, you're out. I'm like, I don't understand. She's like, it's unlimited. It's just if you're sick, you take a sick day. She was confused. I was shocked. There's a moment I realized we're fucked up in America on how we deal with people being sick with work.
So during the first lockdown, we have an elderly neighbor and we would go and check in on her every once in a while and like get her groceries if she needed. And progressively, she started not be able to breathe very well. And we knew it wasn't COVID because she had it before. But like at one point it was like she couldn't even get to the door without like literally not being able to breathe and having to sit down. So my partner decided that we needed to call an ambulance for her and get her to the hospital pronto. And when he told me that he was going to call an ambulance, the first thing that I said was, are you sure? Can she afford an ambulance? Like we could just drive her. And it wasn't until my partner looked at me like, and that it clicked that, oh, that's not a worry here. And then I went upstairs and cried because it really smacked me in the face that as Americans, we are conditioned to not worry about someone's health first, but to worry about whether or not they can financially afford to see a doctor and get help.
Literally everything. When I lived in America, I thought I had it all, or that we were better off than like most countries. You know, we're the greatest country on earth, the American dream. But then I moved to Ireland, and upon arriving here, they explained certain things to me. Here in Ireland, you receive this thing called child benefit, which most developed nations have except for the US. And you receive a monthly check for each child, doesn't matter what your income is. Children here get free healthcare until they're 6. Also, if you're pregnant, your healthcare is free. Also, I'm about to start my master's degree here, and it pisses me off thinking about the fact that I went into college debt for a degree in America, and what I pay here for a master's degree in Ireland doesn't even compare. It just pisses me off that I was struggling and slaving for a dream that never existed, and I thought it was normal.
So in the U.S., I regularly get pneumonia. Sometimes I get like pneumonia and bronchitis, but pretty much all like clockwork. I get it. I had just moved to Scotland for my master's, and I was coming down with a respiratory infection like I do every year. It was just the early onsets of pneumonia, but like normally I wait to the point of where I'm like literally unable to breathe before I go to the doctor because it's expensive in the US. Well, here I was like, you know what? I'm here. I paid for the NHS. Let me go get it. Saw a doctor, gave me a prescription. I went to the pharmacy to pick up my medication, something that I literally would not be able to afford with my minimum wage job and being a full-time student. They gave it to me for free because it was necessary, and I almost cried in the pharmacy. Like tears were welling in my eyes.
So I don't live abroad anymore, but for half of 2018, I lived in Germany, and I have so many stories. The town that I lived in had like a main plaza area, and there was a cafe in that plaza, so a couple of my other American friends and I decided to try it out one day, and there was a construction site nearby. We heard a really loud bang, and, we kind of assumed that someone had fired a gun, and so we, ducked for cover, and then we were looking around frantically, trying to find, a place that we could run to or hide to get out of the situation, and then we realized that no one had shot a gun. No, it was a loud bang from the construction site. That's it. That's all it was. We'd been speaking in English, and we all have really obvious American accents, so all the Germans around us gave us these really sad looks, like, oh, these poor, poor Americans.
So just for a little context, I live in Latvia now, but when this happened to me, I was working in the UK as a bartender. And my coworkers and I were talking about gun violence in the US, and they were kind of making jokes like, oh, I'm surprised you graduated and you didn't get shot first, and stuff like that. And I guess I was trying to defend it, so I was saying, it's not as bad as the news makes it seem. I only know one school that had an active shooter and had to go into lockdown. And, for me, I only had one gun threat in high school, and it was just a threat, and one when I was in elementary school. And then my coworkers kind of looked at me like, you what? And you think that's normal? And I was like, yeah, it's not even that bad.
Oh, when I first moved to New Zealand, all my friends were German au pairs, and at one point I was talking about the Pledge of Allegiance, and they were like, Celeste, what are you on about? What on absolute fuckery are you talking about? And I was like, you guys didn't have to swear loyalty to your country before you started school?
Okay, I have another one. When I was studying in Spain, we had our orientation the first week of classes, and our program director sat us all down and had to explain our health insurance to us and how it worked. And basically it worked that you paid like €1,000 for the semester and you got health insurance, like free health insurance for everything, covered everything. And she had to sit us down, and she had this big group of Americans in a room, and she was like, listen, if you are sick, go to the doctor. And we were all like, yes. And she was like, no, Americans don't go to the doctor. You won't go to the doctor when you're sick. So I have to tell you every year to do this, and still kids will just put off going to the doctor because you're used to just pushing through illness. No matter what it is, I don't care if it's a cold, go to the doctor. And she had to actually spell that out for us.
I'm a U.S. citizen currently living in Costa Rica. We have to be careful about the use of the word American since the Americas are continents. Anyway, I have so many examples of how the U.S. fucked me up, specifically Florida. We got to Costa Rica the second week in November, obviously still deep in the throes in the US with COVID. And coming from Florida where there's so many anti-maskers and COVID deniers, it was surreal to go to these establishments here where everyone's following the Ministry of Health's rules. There's hand washing stations outside of every establishment. There are people taking your temperature to go into grocery stores and certain restaurants. People are giving you distance. Everyone is compliant with masks. And I found myself so defensively postured, ready to argue because I had gotten into so many arguments in Florida with anti-maskers and COVID deniers. It's amazing when people don't politicize a virus.
When I first graduated university about 11 years ago, I got a job at a French market research firm in Chicago. And so they had offices all over the place, and I worked with a lot of people in Canada. And I remember one of my colleagues just was like gone one day, and I hadn't heard from her for a while, and I just thought she got fired. Around a year later, she comes back to work, and I find out that, oh, she had a child. And she had been off for a year for her maternal or parental leave. And I was like, what? You get a whole year off? I mean, Americans, if they're lucky, get like 12 weeks. I remember a lot of teachers from when I was a kid would save up their vacation days year over year if they knew they were going to have a kid so that they could actually take off a few months, and they'd have to use all of their vacation days to do this. It's just mental to me that America considers itself a family-based society and like can't even give parents a good start.
So for me, it was a few different times all while I was living in Australia. One time with the various shootings that we have here in the States, my boss came to me and he was like, are you okay? How are you feeling? Do you need some time off? And I was like, why? And he was like, because I heard about the shooting that happened back in the States. I had to sit there and have an honest moment with myself and him to realize that I had built up a numbness to all the shootings because they happen all the time. So that sucked. Number 2. I have horrific cramps. I always have. They make me pass out. I throw up. I've been in the emergency room I don't know how many times at this point. It's just how it's been. I fought against it, but I finally had my roommate take me to the emergency room, and my total was $100 when I left. As someone who was only on a working holiday visa and not a $2,000 bill like it would have been in the States.
So we live in Ireland, and our oldest is in senior infants, which is the equivalent of the second half of kindergarten. She did kindergarten back in the States. And she came home from school one day and she said, Mommy, we had a drill today. And I go, oh, active shooter drill? No. Bomb threat? No. Mommy, it was a fire drill. Well, oh, okay. I mean, back home, she had active shooter drills every month in kindergarten. We get these phone calls and it'd say, oh, in accordance with Florida law, blah, 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 everything's gone back to normal. And I'm just sitting there thinking of my kid hiding in a bathroom with 30 other kindergartners and her poor teacher trying to keep all these kids quiet. I'm like, that's not normal here. That's something we got used to because that's what America is. It's just one big active shooter drill.
My son was 5 years old the summer that we moved to Portugal. And once the school year rolled around, I took him shopping for some new clothes, some shirts, some shoes. And it reminded me of how the year before, when we lived in Texas, we had done the very same thing, except he had begged me for a pair of those really cool light up sneakers that I loved and he loved. But it broke my heart to have to tell him no, because I did not want him to become an easy target if ever there was a school shooting. And being in Portugal, shopping with him, and not having to worry about that for the first time in my life was a really big aha moment.
There's a lot. This might have to be a series, but here's the first one that comes to mind. It's really two things in one. One night in mid-November, I woke up, I was having really bad chest pains, and I was like cold sweating and everything, all the symptoms of a heart attack. And I was sitting there in my bathroom like, should I call 112 for an ambulance? It's going to be so expensive. There was a moment I literally thought about riding my bicycle to the hospital because it's about a 10-minute bicycle ride away from my apartment. I called the ambulance in the end. It was completely covered by my insurance. After I had the heart attack in the hospital, it was around 5 or 6 in the morning when I woke up. And I remember the first thing I thought was, I need to get my phone. I have to tell my boss I can't come into work today. I mean, the first thing wasn't like calling my mom. It was literally calling my work because I didn't want to get fired. I wasn't going to get fired in the Netherlands for that.
Oh, I've got a couple. So I'm from Los Angeles and now I live in Austria. And basically when I first started working here, they were like, you get 25 days vacation, Fridays off early, and if you're sick, don't come into work. And I was just like, I was floored. Because in the US, you only get 10 days vacation and like 5 sick days, and you don't get Fridays off early. You better work your ass until it's 9 p.m. On top of all of that, all my friends here have like 2 masters, 3 PhDs, etc., 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 because education here is actually free. Amazing. What an amazing concept. In addition, I have yet to see a large homeless community out in the open here in Austria because the government actually offers some social support. A lot of social support. In LA, you have villages, streets, blocks full of homeless people because our government doesn't care about us. And here, people like don't measure their worth off the car they drive.
Okay, so I live in New York now, but I used to live in England. And one time I was out at this bar with my friends, and these two cops walked by. And one of my friends was like, oh, I wonder why there are cops out right now. And I looked at the cops and I got really confused. And I was like, those are cops? And my friends were like, yeah. And I was like, they don't have guns. And everyone was like, why would they have guns? They were like so aghast at that question. And I realized in that moment learned that guns, there are so few guns in the UK, and it's such not an issue that like the everyday cop does not carry a gun. And there are houses in America that have seen more guns in them than a fresh vegetable. It blew my fucking mind. I think about it all the time. I hate guns so much.
Okay, so I'm not currently living abroad, but I did live in Australia for a few months. And one night while I was there, I got a little bit too crazy and I ended up on public transportation without a phone. And I had to find my way back to my apartment and I got lost. And while I got off the tram to get onto a different tram to take me home, a middle-aged gentleman came up to me and I immediately went into attack mode and I was like going to kill him. And he was like, no, I was just going to tell you which tram to take to get back to Preston. And that was when I realized that in Australia, I didn't need to be afraid. Like, granted, take precautions, but I didn't need to be afraid of every man. But in America, I still am.
I get a lot of anxiety when I go into big places like shopping malls or movie theaters or really anywhere where a mass shooting has taken place in the United States. So like even here in the Netherlands, if I go to the Hoogkaterijnen Mall in Utrecht, I will be like looking all over the place for where the exit is all the time, just in case someone comes in and decides to shoot up the place, which is probably really unlikely to happen in the Netherlands. Same thing for movie theaters. When I go into the hall where the movie's playing, where are all the exits? There's this like security awareness campaign that started in the US after 9/11 where it's like, if you see something, say something. And I think that's a lot of pressure to put on your entire fucking population. Basically turned us into a bunch of nervous people ready to be shot at any moment. And you like need to have a plan.
I could do so many of these. Okay, I'll just pick one. So I lived in China for 11 years. I worked with Chinese people, but also people from all over the world. So this one day I was talking to a guy from the UK. I don't remember how we got on this topic. We were talking and I must have said something about like, yeah, I wouldn't want to burden somebody with my problems, you know? And I won't forget this changed how I think about this issue and interact with people. And he goes, It's so weird that Americans think that by talking about your problems, you're bothering somebody else. Like you're putting your problems on them. That's not how it works. I'm not any worse off if you tell me you're having a bad day or you're depressed.